you can see why we've got this hyper protective society that is actually harmful for children. They need freedom. They need to take risks. They need to break their arm when they're on,
Buy my novel, Escape from the Village, from major booksellers online. Go to escapevillage.com. Subscribe to the Substack. Go to fountainheadforum.substack.com. Support the forum. Go to buymeacoffee.com/fountainheadforum. Thank you. Welcome to the party, pal. This is Fountainhead Forum 425. I'm talking to Alec Egizi. He is a lawyer, a very busy lawyer in Colorado. And we're going to talk about family law and dealing with child protective services, parents having their kids removed. How you doing, Alec?
I'm doing good, Chris. Thanks for having me on.
So how did you get into family law? Because I think you said you started out as a public defender.
Yeah, I did. So yeah, I started out as a public defender in Colorado doing criminal law for, misdemeanor adults, felony adults, but everybody had to take a turn at juvenile delinquency law. And none of the other lawyers in my office liked it. It was always just you had to do your turn in juvenile law in order to get to felonies. But I was a former teacher, a former history teacher, and I like kids. So I didn't mind it. And I got in there and I saw what I saw just disgusted me. Because they're children, the law seemed to, and because it's bolder, but it's universal. The law felt like, and the judicial officers felt like, well, we don't really have to protect their due process rights. We're just going to do what we feel is best for them. And I forget who said that quote, but it was Mark Twain. That the person you greatest have to fear is the person who is doing what they think is best for you.
That's C.S. Lewis, actually.
That
But
was
yes,
C.S. Lewis. Yeah.
The person who's the person, the worst people are the people who think they're doing good. Yes.
Yes. So, I went into there, I went into that courtroom and, the things that I saw shocked me. They brought the children out, the children who'd been arrested were brought out, in orange jumpsuits like adults. And they shackled them, which is it's a pretty widespread practice. Where they cuff them by their hands, and then there's a chain that goes to a belly, binding, and that belly binding has chains that shackle their legs, and then their legs are handcuffed together. They can only waddle out. And you'd have kids as young as 12, a 12-year-old girl, just waddling out, terrified. She couldn't really communicate with me because she was so scared. And I thought, well, this is an outrage, and I can't believe this is happening in America. And I think there are all kinds of constitutional violations here. And um, uh, so, yeah, that's where I started. I just started fighting things like that. Um, Kids increasingly getting arrested in junior high for insulting each other online. There were these free speech violations and things like that. But in that capacity, you know, I read a lot of research on it, and um, it was pretty agreed upon that the worst thing that you can do to somebody who is a child who is going down the wrong path is to congregate them with other kids going down the wrong path, and that's what happens when you put them in juvenile detention. So you take somebody, and I know one particular kid. I saw her; she was terrified when she first showed up, and um, they put her in juvie for a week, and then she was friends with all of these kids that were doing things that were much worse. So you'd have a kid who was smoking pot and skipping school, and she'd meet some guy who was smoking meth and stealing cars, that she'd think, oh, he's a badass. I want to be like him. And then, you're off to the races. So in that capacity, I tried to keep kids out of detention, first and foremost. And one of the ways that I would do that in more aggravated circumstances was I would ask the Department of Human Services to assess whether they would be appropriate for foster care, just to keep them out of detention. And so I got to know the Department of Health and Human Services through that. I was also on a steering committee for evidence-based reforms. They were good reforms, but a lot of the members of the department were there, and so I had to work with them in that. Once I left the public defender's office, I joined what they call the Office of Respondent Parent Counsel here in Colorado. So if you're indigent in the criminal world, you get a public defender. For a long time, if the county took your kid away, you didn't get anybody for free, even if you were too poor to have a lawyer. And for many people, losing your child is worse than going to jail. So I say the 90s, they created this agency to appoint lawyers when the state comes and takes your children. So that's how I got into it.
That's why, that's wild. 12-year-old girls in shackles. I just, what are these cops afraid of? That's the question I ask myself. She's a 12-year-old girl in shackles. You can't handle that. I mean, I just, I
Yeah,
mean, yeah, it's real. That's real. And as you pointed out too, I think that is the word. The dumb kid who steals a candy bar at the grocery store, gets in with these people who've stolen cars, and then suddenly they're stealing cars. It's yeah,
right.
uh, y-
Especially the girls who will meet
yeah,
these boys and think they're cool and tough and gangster and sexy, you know.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, I mean, so when I got into it, and I think I talked to you about it before, but I don't know if we got it here. So I was really outraged by that, and wrote up a big constitutional motion, and um, it took a couple of years, but I got it banned in Boulder, shackling. I got shackling banned in Boulder and Broomfield, and then was able to help Adams County out. Um, but it's still pervasive all over the state. Uh, and interestingly enough, the first county to ban it was Miami-Dade County.
Florida,
Yeah, where you got real crime.
real crime, and yeah, and real crime, and a lot of people, and and also very probably the most ethnically diverse county in the country.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is gallows humor, but one of my colleagues was down in Jefferson County, um, and this is all in the Denver metro area for those who are out of state here.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
Most people we know Denver, but we don't know what county it's in. But yeah,
yeah. So he was there, and they were shackling the kids down uh, in Jefferson County, but the adults weren't shackled.
yeah,
And so my colleague asked the sheriff's deputies, like, "Why do you shackle the kids but not the adults?" And he was kind of a heavier deputy who, he was kind of like cruising towards retirement. And he leaned into my colleague and he whispered, "Because we can't catch the kids." But the excuse was always like, if the kids run, then we have to tackle them and we don't want to hurt them. And I mean, the kids don't run out of the courthouse. It just doesn't happen. I've seen them run from probation. I've seen them run from the cops on the streets,
Yeah.
but the sort of aura of authority there in the courtroom, and there's just so many people there, they don't think they can get away. So, and if they didn't have a problem with it in Miami-Dade, why should they have a problem with it in Boulder?
Yeah.
But we had to have a committee meeting that lasted for 2 years and draft up all kinds of rules, and then the cops said we need extra
Yeah.
deputies, and so we had to pay off the government, but we got it done.
Oh, yeah. That's wild. One thing they found too, at least in schools, obviously, but they've often found that, that getting kids to do various forms of community service is actually a really good thing.
Yeah.
I don't know if they put kids on probation and things like that, tell the kids to go volunteer at the animal shelter or something like that. Uh, but they've often found that that actually ends up being very positive, and sometimes the kids actually end up, finding something they end up going back to that, or even, but yeah,
You know, I took a class on childhood brain development or
yeah,
training, or a few of them. Um, but the one that was most interesting was they ran which interventions are most likely to prevent recidivism,
yeah,
and this tells you about the inefficacy of government. The number one thing that prevents recidivism is growing up. Like, if you get older, you stop being an idiot because your prefrontal
yeah,
cortex is developing. Duh.
yeah. It's funny. I was just reading a few days ago about Babe Ruth, and apparently he was absolutely incorrigible. But then suddenly, he starts playing baseball, and he just, that was it just changed him. It's like he really, and of course, one of the greatest baseball players of all time. But sometimes I think just putting the kids into a good sport, or it's almost like, as I said, you take away the bad drugs and you find them a good drug,
Right.
and
Right.
for baseball, for Babe Ruth, baseball was a good drug, something that makes them feel good and something that's positive. And it's not a literal drug, but that's, maybe it's playing soccer, or I mean, or just reading lots of books. But yeah, anyway, yeah, it's wild though that they do this, and of course, kids don't get due process. I don't know why anybody's thought of, like, having linked the juvenile court, literally, where you maybe have a jury of 12 to 17-year-olds, and they're actually the jury, and it'd be
Yeah.
very interesting where it's just given to these judges arbitrarily. But so you end up with, what are some of the most egregious cases you see where, parents are losing their kids? I mean, this really bothers me nowadays, because I'm also seeing things, like, there was that case in North Carolina where the 10-year-old boy walked to the store, got hit by a car, killed, and then his parents are charged with crimes. I mean, this is really getting, the government is just getting so involved in
Yeah.
what they do, and it makes no sense to me.
Well, so here's a good segue, I guess. So I got done with this case a little bit ago. I've got some administrative stuff that I'm doing with it right now. Um, and I gotta be careful about confidentiality, but
Yes, yes, please,
so
don't give any
I'm
real names out, definitely.
yeah, I'm painting in broad strokes here.
Yeah,
Um, but so I had this case come in, and it was not your typical case. This woman was, um, so they had 50-50 custody under a domestic relations allocation of parental responsibility at child custody agreement. Um, but she didn't trust dad. She had seen things between him and his mother that concerned her in terms of physical boundaries. Um, and but she was a good mom. Uh, she was very Boulder. went to ecstatic dance circles and, drum circles and ecstatic dance things and potlucks where they cook, vegetarian, organic, crock pot stuff. Um, and, I went to her house and, it was very clean. She had guinea pigs. She had a 4-poster bed for her kid, all kinds of toys, statues of Buddha, signs like live, life, love, or something.
Yeah.
Um,
Real hippie.
yeah. And she was closely bonded with her daughter. The problem was that her daughter would come home and say, you know, make say that dad touched her inappropriately. And she had seen these things that made her worry about it. And so she panicked and she got a therapist and she'd call the therapist all the time. And the therapist said, I'm not available right now. And she's like, what should I do? She's like, well, call the DHS hotline. So she did every single time she heard something from her child, which was a lot, 67 times. And these were investigated by the department and were found to be unfounded. She called the cops. The cops investigated it several times. It was unfounded. So the department, I think, just gets sick of it after a while. Then, mind you, these hotline calls are your mandatory reporter.
Yes.
So it has to go, it has to become a thing.
Yeah.
So they charge her with, or they open up a dependency and neglect case and remove the child from her custody. And so I went in there on the first custody hearing, and all of these very nice, although hippy dippy people are there in the hallway and they want to talk about how she's a wonderful mother. So we have an extended hearing on it, about 3 hours. And then, mind you, I've just met this woman 24 hours or
Yeah.
2 hours
Yeah.
before. And my biggest argument there was, okay, guys, what do you think you're gonna do here? Right? Okay, let's say she's wrong, that nothing's happening to her daughter. Okay? What are you gonna do? Put her in therapy? That you're wrong therapy? Like that doesn't exist. Right? Let's say she's right. Right? Then she's doing what a good mother should do, trying to protect her child. So there's nothing that you have the capacity to do as government to fix this problem. Now, you can do one thing. You could charge her with false reporting and prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. Or you could charge him with sex assault and prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. But there are some family problems, some social problems that the government is not competent to fix. And they said, well, whatever, Egizi. You're always like that. And I'm like, okay, fine. We'll wait. And so every time we had a meeting, they're like, yeah, she's like a really good mom. And I'm like, uh-huh. What do you guys have to offer here? And they're like, we don't know. I'm like, uh-huh. And I'm just sitting there tapping my foot, waiting until they realized it was right all along. And it only took 4 months to get the thing dismissed. But in the meantime, her daughter is, this is traumatizing for a kid to lose her mom.
Yeah. Yeah.
And of course it's traumatizing for the mother. So, that's one example. You want others?
Yeah. Well, you mentioned also this thing about, kids in junior high saying stuff online. What happened with that?
That was a delinquency case, I think.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was, it's a little crude, but I call this, dick in the face.
Yeah.
It was a kid drew a picture of a penis on one of his friends' pictures on Snapchat,
Oh,
and they charged him with disorderly conduct.
what?
You want to hear that
This
story?
is this is just stupid kids used to do. I mean, you remember. I mean, I'm thinking of the movie 10 Things I Hate About You, where the guy's talking and somebody while he's talking to somebody actually draws one on the side of his
Yeah,
head,
yeah.
and somebody later says, "I have a dick on my face, don't I?" I mean, it's this is stuff that kids
That's what they do.
the
So okay,
overreaction to things, Rudyard Lynch, talks about the time, he got called into the principal's office because he drew swords. I mean, and the funny thing too is, nowadays, when I was in high school, there was not a full-time police officer there, but there is apparently one there now. And it's like nowadays, everything, immediately, teachers kids would fight and teachers would break it up. And the kids go to get suspended or whatever. But, no, the police aren't called. But now all of this stuff becomes a police matter, it seems, when it didn't before.
it's funny when you find yourself agreeing with a Marxist.
Yeah.
So Michel Foucault, did you ever read Discipline and
No.
Punish?
What? The what?
Michel Foucault was a French philosopher in the
Yeah, I know the name. What's the name of the book?
Discipline and Punish. It's a history of how the prison came to be.
Yep.
So here's his thesis briefly. And I read it back in college and I thought, okay, that's interesting. But once I got involved in the system, I thought, oh my God, this guy's nailed it.
Yep.
So the book starts off with how punishment existed in the Middle Ages, and it gives a very graphic description of drawing and quartering people, ripping out their guts, and so forth. But that was reserved for people who attacked the king.
Yeah.
So you punished the body for punishing the body of the king. And he said what happened was reformers came in and said, you know what, we should make punishment more gentle. But as it became more gentle, it became more general. So more and more things were punished. And so the scope of government punishment increased. And then he talked about Bentham's panopticon, which was a prison that was designed so that all of the people who were prisoners could be observed, but the guards could not be. So that you could keep eyes on everybody and you always had to pretend like there were eyes on you. And then his thesis is, well, all of the other government agencies got in on the surveillance game and they all cooperate with one another to control, bureaucratize, classify, and control people.
Yeah.
So, you go to a mental health professional, they're mandatory reporters. Right? If you go to a teacher, mandatory reporter. I had a kid who she's 12, right? And she was just stupid. And her mom took away her cell phone and she put bleach in her mom's smoothie. And of course her mom could smell it a mile away. She tried this twice. So the mom's like, that's it. We're going down to the mental health hospital. She takes her to the mental health hospital. Mental health hospital calls the cops. The cops charge her with 2 counts of attempted murder.
The
When the
girl?
mom did, yeah, to the little girl. And the mom didn't want that at all.
Oh gosh, no. That's serious.
Yes. So I had to deal with that case. But yeah, so that's it. And when you think, yes, you're right. And when you're talking about SROs, the resource officers that are in jails now, and there's a lot of, or in schools now, there are schools where they, you have to go through a metal detector
Yeah.
to get in. There are schools that have booking stations in the school. And so the schools are hand in glove with the cops, as are the hospitals. If your kid is sick, if you, let's say, especially infants, where they're, not thriving for some reason, or they have a broken bone that you don't know where it came from, you take it into the hospital. If they have any suspicion, they'll call the cops and you'll get charged with child abuse for trying to help your kid.
Yeah, the whole thing, and kids used to do that. It wasn't, when I grew up, that it wasn't like that.
Yeah.
Kids broke their arm, and it wasn't, they wouldn't take the kids into an office and ask them questions for 3 hours.
Yeah. Well, and What what was I gonna say just about that? Yeah, no, there was, what frustrated me as again, a juvenile defense attorney was the number of times kids would get charged with assault for a fight at school.
Yeah, well, that never happened with us.
Never. In Texas, when in the 80s, the principal would spank you.
Yeah,
They'd call your parents, ask if it was okay, and they would spank you. And your parents would be like, "Oh, heck yeah. Whoop his ass." But here it's much worse. So I had all of these, dozens of, just school fights where they would the SRO, because there's an SRO there and he's got
SRO.
nothing to do. He charges them with a crime. They come in juvie.
Yeah,
Everything's got worse. And I told my judge, um, we're actually respected quite a bit. Although we went toe to toe all the time. Uh, she actually used to be a prosecutor. She prosecuted Kobe Bryant,
oh, wow.
but she's tough. And I mean, like, tough in a sensible way. And I remember we were talking about fight. I said, "Judge, I don't even understand why you have these cases coming in. Like, this is the school's job,
Yeah,
is to discipline their kids. I was a teacher. I had to discipline my kids. Is that my favorite part of the job? No. Did I pass the buck on to the cops? Hell no. Because you also have to protect your kids." And I said, I don't know about you, but I got into a lot of fights in junior high. I'd say about
yeah,
5 fights in junior high. And they were probably I learned more from that than probably from any class I took. I learned, you know, how to stand up for myself,
yeah,
and that's and, how to get along with somebody after you did have a fight, how to go over there and say, "Okay, I'm sorry, I did this wrong." And they say, "I'm sorry, I did this wrong." And then you're best friends,
yeah.
right?
It's weird how that happens with boys. I don't
Yeah.
know if that happens with girls, but it definitely happens with boys.
Oh, no, good girls will destroy each other and everybody else.
Yeah.
Regina George.
I can tell you this, and this was either late '82 or early '83, and, actually, I think it was late '82, and I'm a 6th grader, and I'm walking around with I'm walking home. I think we were stayed late for a computer class at school. We're walking across Jefferson Avenue, and well, I'll call him Kenny,
Yeah.
and Kenny's my age. Kenny had a little brother who, I guess his mother took thalidomide, but his arms were much shorter than they should have been.
Uh-huh.
So Kenny was very protective of his little brother.
Yeah.
There was a kid, we were in the 6th grade. I think his little brother was a 2nd or 3rd grader, but
Yeah.
a kid in between was, teasing, his little brother. And so then one day Kenny decides to bring a knife to school, starts chasing him with it because he's picking on his brother. So then later we're walking down the street, and somebody who's bigger than us and pulls out a knife, said, "Did you pull a knife on my brother?" And I don't know, he must have been maybe 13 or 14. He was clearly taller, and I'm just looking at and I'm just watching and thinking,
Yeah.
Well, first of all, I'm thinking, I know that knife isn't for me. So I can't believe, looking back, I can't believe how calm I was.
Yeah.
But, the other thing too was I never told anybody in my family about that, and nothing. I think he was just trying to scare Kenny, but, uh, Kenny told his mom, and then suddenly mom was driving him to school every day, picking him up at lunch, taking him to lunch. I mean, it's like, suddenly she went full-blown helicopter parent. It was so
Yeah.
weird. Nothing with the law, but it was just this whole contrast in attitudes. Because I never I never said it, told anybody. I mean, and of course, back then when, kids were picking him up, it was like other people were, like, laughing at him, said, "Oh, your mom's gotta pick you up," it's like and now it's so funny how just it's like we don't want let kids work things out, and therefore people don't wanna learn to work things out without the government, and, Alec, I don't like saying this, but I don't think that we would've went this way if we still had stay-at-home moms.
Yeah, and and I don't want to go like
Yeah,
too red pill on us on this, but I agree. I was raised in a very traditional home, and I see all kinds of problems with the genders not partnering with one another, but
yeah,
demanding things of one another. I think, especially after COVID,
yeah.
it's this increasing isolation, um, very um, vapid, shallow relationships between men and women. And I think it hurts them both.
Well, I think when we had stay-at-home moms, though, you were also much more likely to get to know your neighbor and stuff like that.
Hmm.
I mean, there was a case too years ago where, I knew somebody who was trying to steal. He was underage, so he was trying to steal Playboys from the newsstand.
Hmm.
So the lady notices, well, I know who you are. So the lady doesn't call the police. The lady calls mom and said, "Hey,"
Right.
and then apparently got caught a second time, and then after the second time it happened, said, "Look, stop this, or we are calling the police." But
Right.
nowadays, it would be an immediate call to the police.
Oh
That
yeah.
that's what kind of bothers me. Somebody else was telling me a story about how his kid would get angry and he'd crawl out the window upstairs and sit out on the porch roof. And apparently, had a cop walk up and said, "Hey, your kid's sitting on the porch roof." And again, I'm like, well, if you're a neighbor, why don't you just go up and said, "Hey, neighbor, your kid's sitting up on the porch roof." Says, "Yeah, we know." Instead of calling the police on people, it's
Yeah. It's because
more
people
you
don't
just
have
yeah,
the social skills or the emotional skills or the bravery
yeah,
to actually go over to the neighbor and say, "Hey, I have a problem with you." Short example, but personal example. Um, so we have this valet trash system here in my apartment where you put the trash out and they come and pick it up for you.
yeah,
But you're not allowed to let it sit out all day. You can only take it out at certain times. And I have a dog who's too smart for his own good and
yeah,
very food motivated. So he will get into that trash if I leave it anywhere
yeah,
that he has access to. And he can open up doors and he can get on counters, knock things over, and get to it. So I was leaving it outside, but the property manager said, "Hey, you can't do that." And we like each other. So, like, and I was like, "Okay, well, what do you suggest I do?" And they said, "Well, why don't you put it out on the porch? That's okay." So I said, "Okay." So I put it out on the porch. Of course, first thing that happens when I do that is that the porch um, lock doesn't latch well, and he can smell it out there. And so I leave for like I actually go out with friends, and so I come back. I come back a little late on a weekend, and he has busted out that porch door, gone to the garbage, and torn it up, and then got all excited because people saw that he was out there, and he barks at them. And I just come home, clean up the garbage. I don't know that, he was barking. Next day, I get an anonymous letter on my door, and it said, "It is extremely irresponsible of you to put your dog out on the porch. If you have been reported to property management, and if this happens again, I will call animal control. You should be ashamed and take better care of your dog. It wasn't signed, no number, anything like that. And the problem with that is, one, the facts are wrong, right? I didn't let the dog out; it got out, right? Uh, Two, what you just did doesn't help my dog; it hurts my dog. You call animal control, and they seize this dog that I rescued just 6 months ago from somebody who couldn't take care of him, and you're threatening to take the dog away again. You think that's in the dog's best interest? And this is something that we could all talk about if we had a conversation.
Yeah.
That's what you
I was like,
do with neighbors. You got a problem with him, you go and talk to him about it.
yeah. Nobody wants to have conversations anymore. It's so and anonymous. I mean, yeah,
Yeah.
that I
People, if a friend has a problem with you or something like that, they ghost.
all these things are anonymous. The call to the police is anonymous. Everything's anonymous, and we've got it, it's
I was trying to onboard a new legal assistant for about 6 months here,
yeah,
and I would train them for about a month and a half, and then they just no call, no show for work.
yep,
They wouldn't come in and say, I'm sorry, I can't do this. I'm obligated to other things, or I found another gig. They would no call, no show for work.
yeah, yeah,
So,
we've had people do that. It's so wild. They just don't call, don't show. You don't even know where they are.
I'd feel like I was, I'm becoming an old man, but the truth of the matter is I was an old man at the age of 10. I would
In
watch
some ways, I
the
was
news.
too.
I would watch the news and be like, "Man, back in my day when I was 5, it didn't happen like this. Get off my lawn."
Yeah, get off my lawn. Yeah, what
But
what are
okay, let me go back to. I'll tell you this story. It's a fun story.
yeah,
Probably one of my favorite stories. But I'll tell you about Dick in the Face. Okay. Um. So yeah, this kid draws a penis on a picture of a dorky looking picture of one of his colleagues at school, and the details of said member um will be a mystery forever because it's Snapchat, so it disappeared. There was disputes about whether it was in the act of Congress with uh, the picture or not. So, in any case, I get this case come across my desk, and I'm dealing with serious cases, right? I have kids who are like shooting each other, stealing cars. I've got adults who've murdered people, and I get this. Come across my desk, and I'm like, what the fart? Like, what the hell? This is. Are you kidding me? They arrested this kid for this? And I get really upset about it. It's much smaller than my other big cases, but the principle of it just like drives me nuts. And so I go into juvenile court on our docket day, and I have this DA. She's kind of sassy, like New York, like and she's like cruising to her pension. And name is literally Karen. It is literally Karen.
that's a great name, and it's really sad what's happened to it.
So I walk up to her just furious. I'm like, God damn it, Karen. What the hell is this? Dick in the face? You're putting this here for me? I'm busy. All right. This is bullshit. Kids do stuff. All right. You're gonna dismiss this. You are gonna dismiss this. She's like, no, you get a 3-month deferred sentence. It'll come off his record. It's a petty offense, Alec. Don't get pissed. And I'm like, no, Because what if he doesn't show up for probation? Then he gets, this crime on his record for drawing something? No, just dismiss it. No diversion, no, deferred sentence. You're just dismissing. And she's like, but she was very stubborn. She was from New Jersey. So, she said, no, I'm not going to do it. And I was like, oh, you're not? Fine. Fine. You know what we're going to do? We're going to take this to trial, Karen. We're going to take this to trial. Yeah, that's right. A room full of law-educated people are going to spend a day talking about taking the face. That's what we're going to do. And she's like, fine, I'm not afraid. I'm like, I'm not afraid either. And so then I go to my investigator, who's this she's cute, like bubbly. She's like 23 years old at the time. I think not the typical investigator that you would think of, right? Which are typically grizzled old guys, and they're great too. But she'd be like, like one of those girls. And but she was an awesome investigator, super sharp, always followed through. And she was like a girl's girl, so she could get things out of people that nobody else could. Right? She'd be like, "Oh my God, he did what? Girl dish, uh-huh." And so I said, Paige, I need you to subpoena that entire school. I want to shut that school down. But if you can't do that, just get the principal, because I want to drag him into court and say, why didn't you do your job and educate your kid? And discipline your kid. Why'd you call the cops? Have them do it. And she's like, I'm on it, boss. But it was summer vacation, so, she went in there. She would go in there. She'd see him, but he'd hide under the desk. And the secretary would say he wasn't there. And so on the day of trial, she calls me up and she says, I found him, Egizi. I found him. And I said, okay, go get him, Paige. Go get him. So the rule with service of process is that you can't lie about who you are, but you don't have to come out and say that you're a process server right away, or, as long as you don't lie, you're okay. So it's the first day of junior high with all these kids walking in there, and she's short and bubbly, like I said. And she walks in there with all of the other new kids coming in, and a Guns N' Roses t-shirt and some jeans. And she goes up to the registrar and she says, hi, do you know where the principal is? And they're like, yeah, he's in the library. Do you need some help? She's like, no, thank you. So she goes down to the library and she's like, hi, you the principal? The principal says, yeah, are you lost, sweetie? Can I help you? And she's like, no, I'm an investigator with state of Colorado. You've been served. So he gets outraged. He calls the general counsel for Boulder Valley School District, and she calls me and she's like ranting on me, saying, this is so unprofessional. I can't believe that you would do this. Blah, 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 blah. And I said, yeah, okay, are you done? She says, yeah. And I said, okay, well, let me tell you what I think is unprofessional. I think it's unprofessional for somebody who's in charge of protecting children and educating them to call the police on them. I think it's unprofessional for somebody whose job it is to educate and children, both intellectually and morally, to neglect that obligation and put it on others. And I think it's definitely unprofessional for a state official to dodge surface of process when that is a constitutional right that everybody has, and especially to violate the constitutional rights of the children under his care. And she says, well, you have to have 48 hours of service before a subpoena is valid, so we're not coming. And I said, well, that's a civil rule, not criminal rule. So I would hate to call the cops and have them go to your school and arrest your principal in front of everybody on the first day of school. But I'll do it So I'll see you at 1:30.
Yep.
So we go in there, and here's the point of the story, right? Because this is a free speech story. And so he was charged with disorderly conduct, and this is where it gets interesting. Disorderly conduct is 1, making lewd or offensive gesture or utterance. 2, in a public place. 3, that somebody would reasonably know would cause a breach of the peace. So here, let's play a game of guess and tell here. Is a drawing of a dick lewd or offensive?
I guess so.
Yeah, I gave that one up. I was going to say, they talk about dicks in the Bible, but whatever. I'll give you that one. I'm not going to die on that hill. 2, is it a gesture or utterance? It is a drawing on a picture on Snapchat. And what happened was he drew it on the picture. He showed it to his friends. His friends laughed. And the kid heard what was going on. The kid who was being made fun of heard what was going on, came over and pushed my kid. And my kid got arrested because he caused a breach of the peace. He didn't send it to him. He didn't confront him with the picture. He just showed it to his friends, and his friends laughed. They said, "Oh, you are both a Voltaire and Picasso. This is the wittiest thing a junior high student could do." But that's how it got charged. So, okay, what do you think? Do you think a drawing is a gesture or an utterance?
A drawing is I guess not.
I thought not too. I looked it up. It is an utterance. So, okay, we go on to the next element. It happened in a school. It wasn't sent over the internet. It happened at a school. Is a school, a public school, a public place?
Yes.
No, it is not. See, this is
not.
this is why you look these things up, because you can't just walk into a school, right? It's
Okay,
defined.
that's true. Yeah, you can't just walk into a school.
So it's an educational institution under the law. So I win right there. Boom. Not guilty. This kid's not
Yeah,
guilty.
so every school has a sign, that says all visitors must report to office. Yeah.
Right. So, and then the fourth element that a person would reasonably know would cause a breach of the peace. Now, he didn't show this to him, right?
Yep.
And, do you think it would start a fight necessarily if you just made fun of somebody? So there's that. And that dovetails with the rule under the First Amendment, which is you can insult people. Right? That's part of free speech. But if you do it with fighting words, these are rules that came back in the 70s, then that could be prosecuted. So anyway, I take it to court. I make those arguments. I'm sure that I'm going to win, and the judge says, same judge. She says guilty. I'm like, what? And I said, she's like, nah, it's homophobia and it's cyberbullying. I'm like, judge, those aren't crimes, right? Those are like the ideas of the day. And she's like, okay, this case is over. We're done. We go to sentencing, and Mom, I'm appealing. And both of them look at me like, are you insane, Egizi? This is such a rinky-dink case. I'm like, no, I'm appealing this. So can it's in the context of the case. Is it there's a bad word that's involved in.
Go
the
ahead and use
appeal.
the bad word. Yeah.
Okay.
This case is insane. I agree.
So
We did a lot worse things when I was in school. I mean, insults and people giving each other the finger and all kinds of stuff. It's so
So about a year later, it comes back on appeal, and I've won. It was a 3-judge panel. They put a 3-judge panel on this. It's a published opinion. It's enshrined in Colorado law. And we'll start with the dissent. There was one dissenting judge.
Yes.
And you could tell he's some sort of old curmudgeon who doesn't know how Snapchat works. And he's just like, yes, these are drawing this picture is a fighting word. And he found a good case with a word that's very similar that in the 1970s was considered so offensive that it would start a fight. If you were insulting another man, what do you think that word might have been?
In the 70s?
Yeah, I'll give you a hint. Lenny Bruce got arrested for saying
Fairy?
cocksucker
Oh, jeez.
because you're calling somebody gay, right?
Yeah.
And this is such a weird thing. So here's somebody who is on the left arguing that to call somebody gay is offensive when you're saying that it's just fine to be gay. It's like just kind of all mixed up there.
Yeah.
But they're relying on this old kind of stuff, saying like, yeah, gay is so horrible that we can, allow people to get punched for saying it. So the funny thing is, it's a 26 page published opinion, but 3 of it is him quoting this case. And so it's cocksucker, 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 cocksucker. Just for 3 pages, I'm laughing my ass off reading this thing. So then I go back to the majority opinion. Now, this is the Colorado Appellate Court opinion. These things are written by the clerks and then edited by the judges, right? So when you're a clerk, and I was a clerk at the Colorado Supreme Court.
Yeah.
When you're a clerk, most of the cases you get are boring, right? Oh, this trust dispute, this water rights dispute, and you just have to deal with it for 3 weeks reading boring law. But every once in a while, if you're lucky, a gem comes across your desk. And this guy got dick in the face, and you could tell he was having a blast writing his the majority opinion. And so the dissent had said, that's a fighting word. And then it went a little too far and said, not only is it a fighting word, but arguably this is virtual child porn. And so the majority just had a field day with it and said, okay, perhaps the dissent does not know how Snapchat works. But if that was virtual child porn, then this is virtual rhinoplasty. And he puts a footnote in there. And footnotes can be some of the most important things in a decision. And they go overlooked a lot, but they're still law. But what he did was he took a picture of himself on Snapchat. He drew a super big nose on himself. He had a shit-eating grin on his face. He attached that, and that was the footnote. If that was, virtual child porn, this is virtual rhinoplasty. And he said, we do not find these to be fighting words. Therefore, we hold that you have a constitutional right in the state of Colorado to draw a dick on somebody's picture online. And that, Chris, that is my legacy. That is what I have accomplished in my life.
How much money did all of this cost the good taxpayers of Colorado?
I
This
don't know,
entire
but
court case and this entire
it
circus.
was worth every penny.
I'm glad you appealed this. I am, because it's so stupid. But somebody, and there was actually one judge.
No,
You know,
I went
I'm
in.
just I'm just thinking
after I
these
got
people in Colorado, do they ever watch a certain cartoon show in Colorado or you know, this cartoon show that takes place in Colorado and see how which is the most realistic depiction of kids you'll ever see? And that's why it became so popular because it said this is how kids really are,
yeah.
you know,
Did I tell you I had a case that was exactly like South Park? Exactly like it.
such as yeah.
Okay, so 4 friends, 4, young friends. They're probably like 12 years old, right?
Yeah, okay. A little older than South Park, but yes,
Yeah, yeah, older than South Park, but
because South Park, they're
and
all
there's
8-year-olds, but yeah, or
one of them
9-year-olds.
is fat and one of them is Jewish. And the Jewish kid is pissed at the fat kid. It's like, "Fuck you, you fucking fat ass." And the fat kid says, "Fuck you, you fucking Jew." And they charge the fat kid with harassment, ethnic intimidation. And I was like, God, if I could find a way to make that an exhibit and I had a jury, I'd be fine. But you don't get juries for the misdemeanor stuff.
Yeah.
The judge wouldn't find it funny that they have sticks up their asses. Yeah.
Oh, I believe it, yes. Yeah, yeah.
So after I got that appellate decision back, I walk in for docket, the next week, and both of them had read it, both the DA and the judge. And they're like so sheepish. They're just like, "Oh God, it's just, I mean, I don't, and I'm like, I tell you, Judge, I tell you, there's one way that you can avoid making mistakes, and let's just agree with me all the time. You know, I, help me, help you, help me, help you."
28 pages on that decision also. 20 I
It
mean,
was amazing.
somebody probably spent 2 or 3 hours writing that thing at least.
Oh no, they spent a few days.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I spent the entire summer at the Supreme Court writing petitions on certiorari that were about that long. And I would get through one every 3 weeks, maybe. You got to do the research on it. It's legal writing is very technical, specific. It's like half the reason you go to law school is to learn to write and read the way lawyers write and read. So it takes a long time, but I
Yeah.
mean, those 3 weeks were a blast for him. He was just like,
Yeah, I can ima there was they said on, on the paper chase, "We're here to teach you to think like a lawyer."
Mhm.
Yeah, it's a
That's exactly it. I mean, the actual substantive law, I mean, it's helpful. Um, I mean, for me, like, I actually, I'm an academic by nature, and, um, they would actually get mad at me in law school because I would answer the teacher's questions.
yes.
Like, the teacher would ask a question, and, like, the room would be silent. There's 100 of us in there, and I'm like, "God, this is so uncomfortable. Just move this along." So I just raise my hand and answer. It was low-hanging fruit stuff.
Yeah.
And then
What
they get
was
mad at me like, "Oh, you're a gunner. You're trying to make an impression." I'm like, "No, I'm trying to move things along."
so what are some other ridiculous examples of court I mean, people who had their kids taken away when they really just shouldn't have them taken away?
Well, I don't know. I'd like to find something ridiculous. The one that stands in my mind to me is kind of tragic. So we took this one to trial. It was a young Hispanic couple, and they had a baby, and the baby, um, they were doing everything they could to care for the baby, and they took it into the hospital because it kept crying and crying and crying. And the hospital has a look at it. They give it X-rays, and it's got all these broken bones. Um, they give it to the surgeon, and they fix the baby up. Baby goes home okay, but there is again, like I said, this coalition of government that is trying to control and incarcerate people. So they have a group of people at a hospital who will get together, evaluate a case, and then make a case against somebody, and then refer it to the cops. So they said that this was shaken baby syndrome.
And that has since been debunked completely from what I've heard.
Oh yeah, I mean it was very, very controversial from the beginning.
Yeah.
But
That
we
shaking
take it to
babies doesn't
trial.
harm them.
We take it to trial, and the surgeon gets on there, and he's like, "Look, I've seen this before. This is not shaken baby," and they still convict
Yep.
because people are so protective of kids. And I don't know if I mentioned this, last
Yeah, well,
trial, but
sometimes kids will have, like, really brittle bones that break easily too. That's what I hear. I've heard a number of cases like that, unfortunately.
well, yeah, and the infant mortality rate until very recent times was super high before the age of 6.
Yeah. You know
Um,
you know, it's it's wild, and I watched that recently, and I think you're old enough. Do you remember Jessica McClure?
oh, remind me.
Uh, Fell down the well in Midland, Texas in
Oh yeah,
'87 or
yeah, yeah,
'88.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, you know what's wild is, I mean, that was a horrible thing, but people all rallied around, got that girl out, and it was really an amazing story, but nobody got charged with anything for that.
No,
No, and if that happened today, I guarantee they'd haul her off to jail, and they'd put the kid somewhere else. It's and I think, and I don't know, and it just seems to me like they want to extend childhood in a certain way. It's
yeah. Well, and that's I think there's a selfish part of that, which was like if we extend childhood, then if you're feeling bad about getting older, then you're younger than you would be.
yeah,
Um, but if I can recommend a book to your listeners,
yeah.
I think that this kind of blew me away. And I read this book at Hillsdale College, from a wonderful sociology professor, um, uh, Peter Blum, who's still working there.
Peter Blond,
Blum, Blum.
Blum. Okay, that's often called Bloom, but yes,
Yeah, I keep saying that. They told me I was pronouncing it wrong, but
professor at Hillsdale. Yeah. Well, you've
professor at Hillsdale sociology. He said he kept bouncing back between philosophy and sociology, and the philosophy people said you belong in sociology, and the sociology people said you belong in philosophy. But he was such an interesting character. He looked like Big Boy, the big boy from the Big Boy Burgers.
yeah, I'm looking him up right now. Yeah.
He had suspenders. He was really into Frank Zappa, and he was a Mennonite.
Oh wow. Yeah.
Mennonite libertarian big boy Frank Zappa.
Yeah.
So he was cool. And um the class was called Sociology of Knowledge. And so the sociology of knowledge asks the question, how do societies come to think something is knowledge? It's close to epistemology, whereas like how can we know what we know? But this is, how do societies believe something to be known?
Yes.
And the book is called, this is one of the most influential books that I've read. Is called Threatened Children. And it is about how child abuse came to be understood as a social problem. So, for thousands upon thousands of years, child abuse was not considered a social problem. It was a family thing. If you had, you know, beat your kid, you beat your kid.
Is that
Um,
Joel Best?
I would have to look it up again, but it might be. Does it have like a
University of
scary
Chicago
looking?
Press?
Probably. It's been over
Okay.
30 years. So here, but I can look it up and text it to you.
Yeah, well, I just wondered if people want to look this book up. I mean, this could be used on multiple books. The title, I mean.
Okay, there is at least in the copy I had, uh, a black and white picture of two kids on a teeter-totter and a dark, ominous face of a man kind of imposed upon it. But it might have been republished a few times since then, and I can send it to you if I can find it, and maybe you can edit this in the end.
Yeah,
Um. So
I only find one book, and it's Joel Best. So,
okay.
but it's actually more. It is more of a black and white cover. But it's kind of like a fence with like a playground. Yeah,
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
he had another book called Social Problems.
Yeah.
Oh, he also did this book, Damned Lies and Statistics. I guess. Yeah,
Uh,
if that's the
uh,
part, if that's the same person. Yeah,
I should keep reading him because this one blew me away. So, and at the same time, I was reading like what is it? James Buchanan, game theory, that kind of stuff.
yeah,
And this kind of dovetails with that. But basically, this is like the sociological explanation. He said, okay, what happened was in the 50s, somebody came out with an article saying, yeah, you know, it's okay to beat your kids, but if you like severely beat infants, that can cause problems. And so people got on board with that. And then you had a group of people who agreed with it, lobbyists or claims makers, you know, people who are influencing the idea. And what happens is that a group like that will then expand the definition. So they said, this is child abuse. You know, severely beating a 3-year-old is child abuse. And people were like, okay, we agree. And then they said, but it's also child abuse to beat children who are older severely. And they said, okay. And then it just kept expanding and expanding and expanding.
yeah,
So you get to a place where things like words hit like fists. And then the 80s roll around and you have the death of Adam Walsh. Do you remember that case?
yeah, yeah, yeah. Because that his father was America's Most Wanted. Yeah,
Yep.
I think a lot of people said too that kind of end the whole thing of free range kids. You know, your kids are always in danger and all this stuff. Yeah,
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that was that was the watershed moment
yeah,
because that's when everybody said if you let your kids walk away for 5 minutes, they're going to get kidnapped
yeah,
and murdered, you know?
yeah,
And that's where the panic started setting in. And if you think about other things in the 80s, I mean, we're both old enough to remember this. That's the same time where you had the uh, the they call those urban legends start coming up about um, razors in Halloween candy.
razors. Yeah, well, that was always yeah, that was always things out there. Yeah,
Yeah, but I mean, it happened around the same time, and this was about kids
it,
being threatened by strangers.
seems like
It's also
everything
when
is geared to make us to make a low trust society.
it's also when DUI became a thing. DUI was not a crime for a long time, but then MAD came around when a child was killed by a drunk driver, and it's mothers against drunk driving.
Yeah,
And so that, like, if you look at it through that context, you can see why we've got this hyper protective society that is actually harmful for children. They need freedom. They need to take risks. They need to break their arm when they're on, you know,
they
the
need to
monkey
yeah, they
bars.
need to skin their knees. They really do. Yeah,
This
I
is
don't
how
think
you
they should
learn what your
use their
limits are.
arms. Yeah,
One
it's
other
part of growing up. Yeah,
yeah, one other thing that I heard that was really interesting. You know, they have all kinds of safety measures on playgrounds now.
oh
Did you know did you know that the rate and we when we were kids were like on a rusty, you know, um whirligig and just flying off.
you know?
Oh, kids did all kinds of things, they took away the monkey bars, they took away the high diving boards, we actually would occasionally do racing dives into 2 feet of water.
Yeah. And
I and
did you know,
if you do a racing dive properly, you can do it into 2 feet of water. I Now if you
oh,
screw up, you but yeah, it's
one of my former students is a Green Beret
yeah,
now, and we're close. I mean, God, he's probably 40 now. Um, but my ex-wife and his wife and I were all hanging out together in Napa, and we had a hot tub. We're just hanging in the hot tub, and he just runs up because he's a beast and does a dive just like that right into the hot tub at full speed, and he was just fine.
yeah,
But here's the point of the playgrounds is that the rate of injury with the safety equipment is the same as the rate of injury without it, because part of play is children testing their limits. And so if it's safer, your limits are greater. At least that's what I heard. I can't give you some sort of
yeah.
reference to that, but
Oh, yeah, yeah, we I
and
would
so, sorry. Sometimes I get a cadence that sounds like Barack Obama, so it's not on purpose because I just
I mean,
now if you see that there were no protections and now there are protections like that.
yeah.
I'm not trying to do that.
I would tell any kids nowadays to watch a sitcom like Leave It to Beaver or My Three Sons or something like that, or just go back and watch the '76 version of the Bad News Bears,
Yeah.
and you'll see what it was really like. It was kids often talk about in the summer, I'd get up in the morning and have breakfast and then go out all day, and mom would tell me you don't have to come home until
Like
dinner time. Kids would just go out and do whatever. Of course, we're getting into more of the topic of free range kids, but yeah, it's the whole thing now with just all this stuff. I mean,
well, I
and
think it's
yeah,
partially the same
it
thing. Yeah.
seems like everything is just about anytime I learned long ago. Anytime I hear somebody talk about protecting children, I'm just like, oh my god, what's he up to? It's
Yeah. And I think I might have mentioned to you, like, getting back to the dependency and neglect stuff, the thing that was frustrating for me was, it was women were highly favored, even when they were the wrongdoers and the child abusers,
yeah,
to have custody of the kids. And studies show that kids need dads, even though single moms often think they don't need dads. They're
yeah.
wrong. And the kids have much worse outcomes without some sort of male influence.
Well, how many juveniles did you deal with who had no dads around? I can imagine it was tons of them.
Yeah, but a lot of them, like several of them.
Yeah,
So here's another example. Here's a good one for you. Um, his mom, um, she has a kid with dad down in El Paso. And he's got a big supportive family there. She gets all pissy, just puts the kids in the car and leaves and goes to Colorado, near her mom. He's like, whoa, you know, um, I want to share my kids. And they're like, he runs out of money in terms of trying to like get any rights to see his kids. And
yeah,
then she, you know, gets into substance abuse issues. Her kids are neglected. Um, what do? They take the kids, they put them with maternal grandma.
yeah,
Um, I get assigned to dad. I call him down in El Paso. He's been like, I've been wanting to see my kids for 2 years, and I'm like, well, you have your right to see him here. But they make him drive all the way up from El Paso to Colorado in order to see his kids, and he's only allowed to see them supervised for some reason, for you know, for a few hours when he's up there. So it's like a 10-hour drive each way. He does it for 10 weeks, but then eventually he's just like, what's the point of this? When they didn't even consider taking the kids and putting them back with their extended family and their father in El Paso. I argued about it several times, and it was just like, oh no, like there was just an assumption that mom would get the kid. And yeah, I think that it's getting a little bit better about that, but I mean, I had many, many, many cases where the mom was the one who was screwing up. The mom who was passed out on the couch doing that. And the dad was trying to hold everything together, kept down the job, coming home and trying to make sure everything was okay. And he wasn't even considered as a placement option.
Yeah,
But,
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I've had a few people talk about the foster care system and the other things, and it just doesn't seem to work. And you have a lot of people just use it as a cash cow. Apparently, it's how do you think we fix this whole thing, or can we fix it?
oh gosh. Chris, I don't know. It's like once you have the deterioration of the nuclear family, which I don't know is something that might come back. I mean, maybe because with the evanescence of religion, um, I don't see how you could reinstitute the good old days of family, church, and local community. Um, if you don't have that kind of support network, then the government has to come in and say, well, we can't have these people just, you know, walking around on the streets, and some children are clearly quite abused. Um, and there's no, local social network who would be aware of that, who would be able to enforce that. The problem is if you, set up something like the Department of Human Services, just like with the threatened children thing I was talking about. Government also does the same thing, right? It expands and expands. Um, so yeah, this is like the principles of, you know, political economics. That you have an agency, and the agency's incentive is to expand its budget, its power, expand its scope. And so that's what happens here with DHS. Now they're like they got their fingers in every family. I don't want to be bitter about it or pessimistic, um, but I'm bitter and pessimistic about it.
I don't know either. There are so many things right now that I just think I don't see how we can possibly fix them. And I just look up and say, well, maybe I should go, somewhere else and just give up on America. I don't know what kind of citizens we're going to have. I mean, I've said that I think teenagers 100 years ago were probably more mature than 20 somethings are now. And, and we're just, and not to mention, the reduction in populations. And, we've lost, things like lodges and other things too. They're all the things that held the social fabric together just been blown up. And I think that was all done on purpose.
Yeah, I mean, I think the COVID panic just was driving a stake into socialization too.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that was but, I'm hoping is this the low point? Because could it'd be hard to go much lower than the way people acted in 2020.
Let's hope it's the low point. But I've read many books on the French Revolution, and it is not pretty.
Yeah.
But I mean, like, if there's, I guess my hopeful answer to that, and something that I've told myself many times, as I've seen, I come from a fairly libertarian perspective.
Yeah.
And if I knew it was declining. I saw it, since Woodrow Wilson. Like, oh, this is not going in the right direction. But when I joined the public defender's office, I'm like, this all sucks, but I'm here doing what I can.
Yeah.
I can't change public policy, but I can help this person. And, you think of things like Jefferson, the price of liberty is eternal vigilance. And you just got to get in there and fight. You got
Yeah.
to get in there and fight and do what you can. Get on local boards, be a pain in their ass. Um, as a lawyer, it was me going down and, oh, you're denying people who have valid asylum claims a day in court. I'm not saying that they should be here. I'm saying they get their day in court. That's what I'm going to do. Right. And I get them their day in court. I save, kids who draw inappropriate pictures, or people who are, you know, I got a case where somebody slapped a butt and he's charged with sex assault. He's looking at 5 years on the registry, and you just go in there and you say, bullshit.
So like a 12-year-old boy slaps a 12-year-old girl's butt or something. Oh, geez.
Yeah, this is an adult case that I got going on right now.
Okay.
It was,
Yeah.
it was like, hey, babe, bam. And she called the cops on him and he got charged.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Well, sometimes you hear these, like 2 14-year-olds exchange dirty pictures with each other and they're both arrested and, they're just doing it for themselves. It's
Oh, and it's distribution of child porn, class 3
Yeah.
felony, and I've had several of those cases, and it's insane. It's insane. Yeah.
How'd those work out? I mean,
Well, the DAs were like, "Oh, we're just trying to, like, solve this problem because then these pictures are out there, and then they get spread around, and then people look at them and they get excited." And I'm like, "Okay,
well,
so you're just going to use a child, you're going to ruin a child's life in order to solve some sort of social problem."
well,
Uh,
the whole point, was to, to go after filmmakers and stuff like that, the people who really were exploiting kids, and not when
Yeah, some idiot in some DA's office came up with this idea, and then it became rampant. That's what I'm
I mean,
saying. It was
law is supposed to have some basis in common sense. I mean, and now it's just, I guess it doesn't anymore. It's
well, that's Charles Dickens.
yeah,
That we throw that around every once in a while, and I think it's an Oliver Twist. Somebody comes to another character, and his wife had like done something, and he says, "Well, that a husband is responsible for the debts of his wife under the law."
yeah,
And he says, "Well, if the law thinks that, then the law is an ass, and
yeah.
the law shouldn't be an ass."
Oh, do you have any cases of, I should ask, do you have any cases of parents refusing to go along with with boys can have babies and girls can have penises? Yeah, how do any stupid things like that come up or not?
Where
Parents
like
well,
one parent gets in
you're
trouble for
abusing that child
being in.
because you're not acknowledging their their fantasy sex or whatever.
Well, I haven't had a case. I don't think. I'm trying to think where they removed a child because one of the parents um didn't agree with transgender theory.
Yes.
However, I have had it weaponized. So for example, I mentioned previously the girl with the smoothie and the bleach.
Yes.
I should say the boy, because at that point, um, as the case was going, or the reason the phone was taken away was she was looking at that kind of stuff. The mom got upset about it. And the mom was sharing custody with dad and a stepmom, and the stepmom used the fact that bio mom was not on board with transitioning. We're talking about a 12-year-old.
Yes.
Um, as a reason to try to get leverage in the case. But
Oh,
this
yeah.
was a delinquency case. It was a murder delinquency case, not a.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's something that you can make a fuss about, that people make a fuss about.
Yeah, and this is one thing too, and granted, I'm not giving legal advice, but this is often, cases where I've been involved with. This is why, for example, you have rules of confidentiality. Groups like Alcoholics Anonymous is you don't want somebody to use something like that as leverage in a custody case.
Yeah.
And there are things like, oh, I go to ayahuasca ceremonies, or I go to swinger, yeah, or lots of things, and of course, I suppose, we could get it, the fact, that, like, for example, what percentage, of kidnapped child, of these cases of kidnapped child is now just a case of a non-custodial parent taking the kid.
Yeah, it's like 95% or something. I mean,
I
it's like
figured that,
really,
yeah,
really
but they tell us, kidnapped child, like the kid's in danger, and if the kid is with a non-custodial parent, or
well,
maybe the kid's in danger.
I think that example might actually be in Threatened Children itself, right? And so the one of the things, again, that I find really interesting about that is they say what you do as a claims maker is you take an extreme case, something like Adam Walsh,
Yes.
and you say, "Oh my God, look at this! Kidnapping is a problem," and then you make a claim and you say, "But you wouldn't know it, but over 1 million children are kidnapped every year, but 99% of them are parents who are non-custodial who take their kid and run," which is a far cry from kidnapping a 3-year-old, torturing him, and cutting
Yeah.
him up to little bits. Those things are not the same, but you equivocate them.
Well, they abuse language so much, it's, yeah, I decided a while back that said I will not use the word autistic unless I'm talking about a person who is not able to live on their own.
Yeah, that's fair.
Otherwise, I'm not using that word anymore. And you stretch the meanings of these words, and abuse has been stretched, all these things, and you just dilute, it's, just water down the beer, and it's just so ridiculous. But that's a leftist tactic, and
Yeah.
well, it's been great having you back on here. It's been hilarious, and I got some good stuff. And you have
All right.
anything else to say before we go?
No, but just to add on, yeah, I went to
An ice protest? Yeah.
an ICE protest like 2 weeks ago, and I do. I'm very. I believe that immigrants are good for the country. I want a liberal immigration policy, but a legal one.
Yes.
And but man, you're just trying to stand there and listen to them. First of all, it's the left, so everybody gets to speak. So you have like 35 speakers, and then they're all just shouting out platitudes and things that are completely wrong, obviously.
Yes.
And you're just like, I am not a protest guy. I can't handle this. Like,
Oh, yeah. I
I've
can't
been here
I
for an
can't
hour and
handle
a
them.
half, and there's not even hot chocolate. I don't. Yeah.
Both of the people on both sides are so insufferable, and there's no common sense.
Yeah.
I mean, we talked about some of the things, and the tactics, and I do have a show that I recorded but not uploaded, but I did have a lady on from Minnesota, so she was talking about how all this, and just, it's becoming, well, I'm not a fan of his, but, the guy who wrote that book called The Rise of the Warrior Cop, and that's what we have here is
Yeah.
all of our policing agencies are, they're turning into soldiers, and they're acting like soldiers, and that's just not the way, I
It,
mean, I mean, all these law and order people say things like, well, We want just like, Law and Order is just a blank check for the police to do what they want, so if the cop shoots at a 5-year-old kid who steals a candy bar, the rightists will just say, well, he shouldn't have stolen that candy bar. It's
Right,
his
right.
own fault. I mean, yeah, and that's absurd, but no, you really didn't have to shoot the 5-year-old.
Yeah,
But it'll come to that point eventually. I mean,
I was
yeah,
talking to a Law and Order type
yeah,
at at a bar near me, and uh she was talking about it. And I said, you know what color uniforms cops wore when I was a kid? And she said, what? I said, baby blue. You know what color they all wear now?
black.
Black. How to say you're the bad guy without saying you're the bad guy. Oh, ice. Let's put ski masks on now. Oh, wow. You totally don't look like you're about to knock over a bank. Thank you. I feel secure.
Yeah. Well, you think about all black.
I think it's tell I think it's I
You
think
think
people
about
don't think
Darth.
about it,
Think
but
about
I think
Darth
it's
Vader,
telling.
for example.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I
I'm
I hope we can figure this out, but I don't know if we will. It's
well, the tree
well,
of
good luck.
liberty
You're fighting the good
watered
fights.
the tree of liberty is watered by the blood of
Yeah,
patriots and tyrants.
yeah,
And if not blood, then the heart attacks and early strokes of patriots and tyrants.
yeah. Okay. Well, thanks for coming on. Where can
Hey,
we find
Chris,
you out there? I think you're still at egzlaw.com. Yeah.
I am. I hope you can use this and
Oh, I'll use this. Yeah, this is a good show.
cool.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, please like the show, subscribe to the channel, go buy my novel Escape from the Village, check out my Substack, uh, turn on notifications. People are giving me money to buy me a coffee, so thank you, Alec Egizi. I'm Chris Baker. We're out. Buy my novel, Escape from the Village, from major booksellers online. Go to escapevillage.com. Subscribe to the Substack. Go to fountainheadforum.substack.com. Support the forum. Go to buymeacoffee.com/fountainheadforum. Thank you.